The fluorescent lights in the hospital hallway buzzed like angry bees overhead as David walked toward the doctor's office for the third time that week. His sneakers squeaked against the polished floor with each heavy step, and he wished he could turn around and walk back out through those sliding glass doors, pretend this was all just a bad dream that would fade. When he woke up, but this wasn't a dream his. Daughter Mia lay in room 304, getting weaker every single day. David pushed open the door to find Dr. Reynolds sitting behind his desk, with that same look on his face, the one that made David's stomach drop every time the doctor gestured to the empty chair, and David sat down, gripping the armrest so hard his knuckles turned white. "We got the results back from the specialist in New York," Dr. Reynolds said, sliding a folder across the desk. David didn't open it. He already knew what it would say. "More bad news, more impossible choices. The cancer is progressing faster than we hoped," the doctor continued, his voice gentle but firm. "We need to start the experimental treatment within the next 2 weeks, or roar." What David asked, even though he didn't want to hear the answer. The doctor looked down at his hands. "Or we might lose our window of opportunity." David felt like someone had punched him in the chest. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The room spun around him, and he gripped the desk to steady himself. "How much?" he finally managed to ask. Dr. Reynolds hesitated. "The full treatment protocol, including the medication, hospital stays, and follow-up care, $2.3 million. The number hung in the air between them like a death sentence. David taught 4th grade at Lincoln Elementary School. He made $42,000 a year before taxes. He had $1,700 in his checking account and a maxed-out credit card from when his wife had gotten sick 3 years ago. "I don't have that kind of money," David said, and his voice sounded strange and distant, like it belonged to someone else. "I know," Dr. Reynolds said, and there was real pain in his eyes. "The hospital has payment plans, and there are foundations that help with medical costs we can work with. You," David had already been down that road. He'd spent the last month filling out applications, begging for help, starting fundraisers that barely made a dent. His sister had given him everything she could spare, which was $800. His parents were on a fixed income and had nothing to give. The other teachers at school had passed around a collection jar and raised $2,000, which had made him cry in the faculty bathroom, because people were so kind, but it wasn't nearly enough. Nothing was enough. The experimental treatment wasn't covered by insurance. They called it unproven, even though it was Mia's only real chance. David's insurance had covered the standard treatments, the chemotherapy that had made Mia so sick she couldn't keep down water, the radiation that had burned her skin and stolen her beautiful hair. But this new treatment, this last hope, was considered experimental. And experimental meant you were on your own. David left the doctor's office in a daze. He walked down the hallway, past the nurse's station, past the waiting room full of worried families, past the gift shop with its cheerful balloons and teddy bears. Everything felt surreal, like he was moving through water. He stopped outside Mia's room and took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. She was only 7 years old. She deserved to run and play and laugh and grow up. She deserved to have a life. When he pushed open the door, Mia was sitting up in bed, coloring in one of her activity books. Her favorite stuffed elephant sat next to her on the pillow. The elephant was old and worn, with one ear that flopped funny because Mia had chewed on it as a baby, back when things were normal, back when the worst thing David had to worry about was whether she ate enough vegetables. "Hi, Daddy," she said, looking up with a smile that broke his heart. Her face was thin now, too thin, and there were dark circles under her eyes that no child should have. But she still smiled. She was always smiling, trying to make him feel better, even though she was the one in the hospital bed. "Hi, sweetheart," David said, sitting down next to her and kissing her forehead. "What are you coloring?" "A garden," she said, showing him the page. "It has butterflies, see? I made this one purple, because purple is the best color. Purple is definitely the best color." David agreed, keeping his voice steady even though he wanted to scream. Emma went back to her coloring, humming softly to herself. She hummed a lot lately, some songs she had learned in school before she got too sick to go. David didn't recognize the tune, but he had it memorized now, every note, every pause. It was the soundtrack to their days in this horrible room with its beeping machines and antiseptic smell. "Is Mommy coming to visit Mia?" asked suddenly, not looking up from her coloring book. The question hit David like a freight train. It had been 3 years since the accident. 3 years since a drunk driver had run a red light and taken his wife away from them. Mia had been 4 years old then, and sometimes she still forgot sometimes. She asked for Mommy, especially when she was scared or in pain. "Mommy's in heaven, remember?" David said gently. "She's watching over you, right?" Mia said, and went back to coloring like it was nothing, like her heart hadn't just broken all over again that night. After Mia fell asleep, David sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair with his laptop balanced on his knees. The screen cast a blue glow across his face as he stared at the medical fundraising website. He had been putting this off for weeks. His pride kept getting in the way. He had always been the kind of person who took care of himself, who didn't ask for handouts. But pride was a luxury he couldn't afford anymore. With shaking hands, he started typing, "My name is David Chen, and I am asking for help for my daughter." He stopped, deleted it, started again. Mia is 7 years old. She loves butterflies and the color purple and drawing pictures of gardens. She wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up, because she thinks all animals deserve to be loved. His eyes burned, but he kept typing. 3 years ago, my wife died in a car accident. It was just me and Mia after that, and we were doing okay. We were healing then. 6 months ago, Mia got sick at first. We thought it was just the flu, but it wasn't the flu, it was leukemia. The words blurred on the screen, but David forced himself to continue. The standard treatments aren't working. She needs an experimental treatment that could save her life, but it costs $2.3 million. I am a teacher. I don't have that kind of money. I have tried everything. I have applied to every foundation, called every charity, begged for help from everyone. I know, but am still so far from what we need. He attached a photo of Mia from before she got sick. She was at the park wearing her favorite yellow dress, laughing at something off camera. Her hair was long and dark, falling past her shoulders in waves. She looked so healthy, so full of life. It hurt to look at her now, knowing how much she had lost. David wrote one more line, "Please help me save my daughter. She deserves to grow up." His finger hovered over the submit button for a long moment. What if no one donated? What if people thought he was a scam? What if this was just another dead? But what choice did he have? He clicked submit. The post went live at 11:37 at night, while Mia slept in her hospital bed and machines beeped softly in the darkness. David closed his laptop and sat in the silence. He felt hollowed out, empty, like there was nothing left inside him but fear and desperation. A nurse came in to check Maya's vitals, moving quietly so as not to wake her. She gave David a sympathetic smile, the kind of smile people gave when they didn't know what else to do. Then she left, and David was alone again with his sleeping daughter and his impossible situation. He thought about all the people who would see his post. People scrolling through their phones while they ate dinner or waited in line at the grocery store. Would they care? Would they even stop to read it? Or would they just keep scrolling past another sad story, another desperate plea? David put his head in his hands, and for the first time in months he let himself cry, really cry, not the quiet tears he shed in bathroom stalls, or the ones he wiped away before Mia could see, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. He cried for his daughter, who deserved so much better. He cried for his wife, who should be here to help him through this. He cried for himself because he was so tired of being strong all the time. When he finally stopped, his eyes were red and swollen, and his throat hurt, but he felt a little lighter, like crying had released some of the pressure building inside his chest. He looked over at Mia, sleeping peacefully, unaware of how dire things really were. Tomorrow she would wake up and smile at him and ask him to read her favorite story tomorrow. He would pretend everything was going to be okay, even though he had no idea how somewhere out there in the darkness someone might see his post, someone might care. But David didn't let himself hope too much. Hope was dangerous when you had already lost so much. He pulled the thin hospital blanket up to Mia's chin and kissed her forehead. "Hold on, baby girl," he whispered. "Just hold on a little longer." Outside the hospital window, the city lights twinkled like stars, and the world kept turning indifferent to the small tragedy playing out in room 304. In a few hours, the sun would rise on another day, and David would have to figure out how to keep fighting when he was already so exhausted. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, he just sat next to his daughter and held her small hand in his and prayed that somehow, somewhere, someone would hear their cry for help, because if they didn't, he couldn't finish that thought. He wouldn't. The next morning came too quickly. David woke with a crick in his neck from sleeping in the chair again. The early sunlight filtered through the hospital blinds, casting stripes across the floor. Mia was still asleep, her breathing soft and steady. He watched the rise and fall of her chest, counting each breath like precious gifts. His phone buzzed in his pocket, startling him. He pulled it out and saw a notification from the fundraising website. Someone had donated. His heart jumped. He opened the app, his hands trembling. $25 from someone named Jennifer Williams, with a message that said, "Praying for your little girl, $25." It was nothing compared to what they needed, but it was something. It meant someone out there had read his words, had seen Mia's picture, had cared enough to help even just a little. David felt tears prick his eyes again, but this time they weren't just from sadness. They were from gratitude. Someone had heard him more. Notifications started coming. And throughout the morning, $50 from a stranger in California, $10 from a college student who said it was all she could spare, $100 from an elderly woman who wrote, "I lost my granddaughter to cancer. I know your pain." By noon, they had raised $800. By evening, it was 1,500 people were sharing the post, writing comments, offering prayers and encouragement. David's phone kept buzzing with notifications, and each one felt like a small miracle. But even as the donations climbed, David did the math. $1,500, $2,000, $3,000. They were still so impossibly far from $2.3 million still. He held on to hope with both hands, because what else could he do when Dr. Reynolds came by for evening rounds? David showed him the fundraising page. "This is wonderful," the doctor said, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. They both knew it wasn't enough. "How much time do we have?" David asked. 2 weeks. Dr. Reynolds said, "Maybe 3. If we're lucky, but we can't wait much longer." David nodded numbly. 2 weeks to perform a miracle. After the doctor left, Mia asked him to read her favorite book. It was about a brave little girl who went on adventures and saved the day. David read it, with his voice cracking on every other word, and Mia listened with her eyes half closed. When he finished, she looked up at him with those big, trusting eyes. "Daddy, am I going to be okay?" The question hung in the air, and David wanted to lie, wanted to promise her everything would be fine, but he had always been honest with her, even when the truth was hardy. "No sweetness," he said, pulling her close. "But I'm trying my absolute hardest to make sure you are okay," she said simply, and rested her head against his chest. "I trust you, Daddy." Those 3 words. "I trust you." Broke something inside David and rebuilt it at the same time. She trusted him to save her, and somehow he had to find a way that night. After Mia fell asleep, David sat with his laptop again, checking the fundraising page over and over. The donations kept trickling in, $10 here, $20 there, but they needed something bigger. Something that would change everything. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling tiles, counting them like he had counted Mia's breaths. There were 42 tiles in her hospital room. He had counted them so many times, he had them memorized somewhere out in the world. There had to be someone who could help someone with the means and the heart to save his little girl. He just had to find them more. Maybe they would find him. David closed his eyes and let himself believe just for a moment that miracles were real. The penthouse office on the 47th floor overlooked the entire city like a kingdom made of glass and steel. Victoria stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows with her arms crossed, watching the sun set over the skyline, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. From up here, the people below looked like ants scurrying around with their tiny problems, their tiny lives. She had built this empire from nothing 20 years ago. She had been a nobody, working 3 jobs to put herself through pharmacy school, sleeping 4 hours a night, living on ramen noodles and black coffee. Now she owned the 5th largest pharmaceutical company in the country, employed over 15,000 people, and had more money than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. But money couldn't buy back what she had lost. Victoria turned away from the window and walked back to her desk. The office was immaculate. Everything in its place, not a single paper out of order. Her assistant knew better than to leave anything messy. Control was everything in Victoria's world, because the moment you lost control, the moment you let your guard down, life came in and destroyed you. Her phone buzzed with another email, another meeting, another acquisition, another $1 million added to accounts that already had too many zeros. She should feel something, pride, maybe satisfaction, but there was just emptiness. A hollow space where feelings used to beams. "Sterling, your car is ready whenever you are," her assistant said through the intercom. Victoria glanced at the clock. 9:45. She had been at the office since 6 that morning, 15 hours. But going home meant going to that massive empty house with its echo-filled rooms and memories that lurked in every corner. So she stayed here where everything was clean and professional. "And say 5 more minutes," she said, and heard her assistant sigh quietly on the other end. Everyone thought she was made of ice. The dragon lady, they called her behind her back. The woman who fired entire departments without blinking, who crushed competitors, who showed no mercy in business deals. They were right. She was all those things she had to be, because the alternative was falling apart, and she had promised herself 15 years ago that she would never fall apart again. Victoria sat down at her desk and opened her laptop, intending to review the quarterly reports, but her focus was gone. Her mind kept drifting back to that date. 15 years ago today, her daughter would have been 22 now. Would have been. Those 2 words carried the weight of the entire world. Victoria closed the laptop and rubbed her eyes. She hadn't cried in over a decade. Crying was weakness, and weakness was unacceptable. But tonight the walls felt thinner. The armor felt heavier. She picked up her phone and opened social media, something she rarely did. What was the point of seeing other people's fake happy lives, their filtered photos, their humble brags? But tonight, she scrolled mindlessly through the feed, looking at nothing, really just trying to fill the silence in her head. Then she saw a post from a medical fundraising site showing up in her feed because someone she vaguely knew had shared it. The photo stopped her cold. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, with dark hair and eyes that seemed big for her thin face. She was smiling at the camera, but there was something fragile about her, something that made Victoria's chest tighten. The girl looked exactly like her daughter had at that age. Victoria stared at the photo, feeling something crack. Inside the walls, she had built the same smile, the same way her hair fell across her forehead, the same everything. Her hands shook as she clicked on the post and started reading. "My name is David Chen, and I am asking for help for my daughter Victoria." Read every word. Her throat got tighter with each sentence. This man, this father, was living her worst nightmare. His daughter had leukemia, needed experimental treatment that cost more money than most people would see in their entire lives. He was a teacher. He had nothing. He was watching his child die, and there was nothing he could do about it, just like Victoria had 15 years ago. Victoria hadn't had nothing. She had been building her company, even then had money in the bank, but the treatment her daughter needed didn't exist yet. The research wasn't done. The trials hadn't been approved. So she had sat in a hospital room just like this man was doing now and watched her baby girl slip away while machines beeped and doctors said they were doing everything they could, but everything hadn't been enough. Victoria read the post 3 times. Then she looked at the fundraising total, $4,837. People had been donating, teachers from the man's school, parents from his daughter's class, strangers who were moved by the story. $4,000 toward $2.3 million. It was insulting. It was hopeless. Victoria's hands moved before her brain caught up. She opened her banking app and stared at the screen. Her assistant would tell her this was crazy. Her board of directors would say it was a terrible business decision. Her therapist would probably say she was projecting her own trauma onto strangers, but Victoria didn't care what any of them thought. She had spent 15 years building an empire, making money, crushing competitors, being the dragon lady. For what? So she could die alone in a big, empty house surrounded by expensive things that meant nothing? Maybe this was her chance to do something that actually mattered. She transferred the money to $0.3 million, plus an extra $200,000 for any additional costs or complications. The transaction took less than 30 seconds to process. 30 seconds to change someone's entire life. When it was done, Victoria sat back in her chair, feeling strange light, almost like she'd been carrying a weight for so long she had forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. But then panic set in. What had she just done? She had just given over $2 million to a complete stranger, someone she had never met, never spoken to. What if it was a scam? What if the story was fake? What if no? Victoria looked at the photo of the little girl again. That face was real. That pain was real. She knew it in her bones. The same way she knew her own daughter's face. Would she have recognized it anywhere, even after 15 years? She set the donation to anonymous. There was no way she was going to attach her name to this. The media would have a field day. Billionaire CEO tries to buy good publicity. They would say she was doing it for tax breaks or PR or some calculated business. Reason they would never understand that this wasn't about any of that. This was about a little girl who deserved to live Victoria. Closed her laptop and sat in the silence of her office. The city lights twinkled outside her window and somewhere out there in one of those buildings, a father was about to get the shock of his life. She wondered what he would do when he saw the donation. Would he cry? Would he think it was a mistake? Would he believe that someone actually cared enough to help part of her? Wanted to know, wanted to see his reaction, wanted to meet this little girl who looked so much like her own daughter. But that was dangerous. That was attachment, and attachment led to pain. She had learned that lesson the hardest way possible. Victoria stood up and grabbed her coat, telling herself that was it. One donation, end of story. She would go home, pour herself a glass of wine, and never think about David Chen and his daughter again. But even as she thought it, she knew it was a lie that night. Victoria couldn't sleep. She lay in her enormous bed, in her enormous house, staring at the ceiling. The donation notification kept appearing on her phone, confirming the transfer had gone through. $2.3 million just like that, she had. Bought companies for less around 3 in the morning. She got up and went to her home office. She told herself she was just going to check some emails, catch up on work. But instead, she found herself searching for information about the hospital where the little girl was being treated. Dusty Matthews Medical Center across town. About 40 minutes away, Victoria pulled up their website and read about their children's cancer ward. They had visiting hours every day from noon to 8. They welcomed volunteers to come read to the kids, play games, help out before she could talk herself out of it. Victoria sent an email to the volunteer coordinator saying she was interested in helping out. She used a fake name. Helen Morrison said she was recently retired and wanted to give back to the community. It was ridiculous. She was a CEO of a major pharmaceutical company. She didn't have time to volunteer at hospitals. She had board meetings, acquisitions, quarterly earnings calls, but none of that mattered when she thought about that little girl's face. Volunteer coordinator responded within an hour, enthusiastic and welcoming. They would love to have her. Could she come in next week for orientation and a background check? Victoria stared at the email for a long time, her finger hovering over the delete button. This was crazy. This was crossing a line. She had made her donation. She had done her good deed. Now she should walk away, but she didn't delete the email. Instead, she replied, "Yes, I can come in next week." What was she doing? She was trying to save a little girl, or maybe she was trying to save herself. It was hard to tell the difference anymore. Victoria lay back down, but sleep still wouldn't come. Her mind raced with questions and doubts and something else, something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Maybe it was dangerous. Maybe it would lead to more pain. But for the first time in 15 years, Victoria felt like she was doing something that actually mattered. Something real. Something human. She picked up her phone and looked at the fundraising post one more time. The little girl smiled at her from the screen, innocent and trusting, unaware that her life had just changed forever. Live. Victoria whispered to the photo, "Live and grow up and be happy." She didn't know if the girl could hear her. Obviously she couldn't. But saying the words out loud made them feel more real, more like a promise, and Victoria always kept her promises. The next morning she woke up exhausted, but determined. She went through her usual routine, coffee black, no sugar workout, in her home gym shower, and dress in one of her perfectly tailored suits. But something felt different today. The routine felt less like armor and more like a costume at the office. Her assistant noticed. Immediately, "You seem different today," she said carefully. Like something happened. Victoria almost told her.
"Oh, yeah."
Almost explained about the donation and the little girl and the volunteer application, but that would make it real. That would mean admitting she had done something impulsive, something emotional, something that had nothing to do with business strategy or profit margins. Nothing happened, Victoria said in her usual cool tone. "Just get me the files for the merger." Meeting her assistant nodded and left, but Victoria could tell she didn't believe her good letter. Wonder. Victoria tried to focus on work, but her mind kept drifting. She found herself checking her phone every few minutes, waiting for updates from the fundraising site. Finally, around noon, she saw that the father had posted an update. The words were simple, but the emotion behind them was overwhelming. "I Don't know who you are, the post read, but you saved my daughter's life. I don't have words to thank you. I don't even know if you will see this, but please know that you are a miracle. You are an angel. You gave us hope when we had none. Victoria read it 3 times, feeling something warm and painful spread through her chest. She wasn't an angel. She was just a woman who had too much money and too much guilt, trying to fill a hole that could never be filled. But maybe that was enough. Maybe saving one life, even if it couldn't bring back the one she lost, was worth something. Victoria closed her phone and took a deep breath. Next week, she would go to that hospital. She would meet that little girl. She would see with her own eyes that the donation had made a difference. Then maybe, just maybe, she could finally start to forgive herself for not being able to save her own daughter. 15 years ago, the Dragon Lady had made her first move, and nothing would ever be the same again. The hospital volunteer orientation room smelled like coffee and antiseptic. Victoria sat in a plastic chair surrounded by retired teachers and stay-at-home parents who actually wanted to be there. She felt like a fraud in her casual clothes, jeans, and a simple sweater that probably cost more than everyone else's entire outfits combined. She had never worn jeans to anything in her life. The volunteer coordinator, a cheerful woman named Patricia, stood at the front of the room explaining the rules. No photos of patients, respect privacy, keep things positive, wash your hands constantly. Victoria barely listened. She was too busy trying to calm her racing heart. What was she doing here? She could write another check, hire someone to check on the girl, send flowers. This was insane. But then Patricia started talking about the children's cancer ward, and Victoria's attention snapped back. These kids are fighters, Patricia said, her voice soft but strong. They are going through things no child should ever have to face. But they still smile, they still laugh, they still hope. And sometimes all they need is someone to sit with them, someone to read them a story, or play a game, or just listen. Victoria's throat tightened. She remembered sitting in a room like that, watching her daughter pretend to be brave when she was terrified, reading her the same story over and over because it was the only thing that made her feel safe. After orientation, Victoria was assigned to the cancer ward. She would start next week. 2 hours every Wednesday afternoon, reading 2 kids, playing board games, helping with art projects. Simple things, normal things, except nothing about this was normal that week. Dragged by, Victoria threw herself into work, staying at the office until midnight every night, trying not to think about what she had done. But Tuesday night she barely slept. She kept imagining what she would say if someone recognized her. What if David was there? What if he somehow knew she was the one who donated? But why would he know? She had been anonymous. The transaction was untraceable. She was just Helen Morrison, a retired volunteer who wanted to help. Wednesday afternoon, Victoria left work early, claiming she had a dentist appointment. Her assistant looked shocked. Victoria never left early for anything. The drive to St. Matthews took exactly 38 minutes. Victoria gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. She had negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but driving to a hospital to read stories to sick kids made her feel like she might throw up. She parked in the visitor lot and sat in her car for 10 minutes, staring at the building. Finally, she forced herself to get out and walk inside. The volunteer desk was on the 2nd floor. Patricia was there waiting with a bright smile and a name tag that said, "Helen, so glad you could make it," she said, handing Victoria the tag. "Here is your badge. This will get you into the cancer ward. The nurses know you are coming. They will show you around." Victoria's hands shook as she pinned on the name tag, Helen Morrison, not Victoria Sterling, just Helen, a nobody, a volunteer. She followed Patricia down a long hallway, past rooms with closed doors and hushed voices. The hospital sounds were all too familiar, the beeping machines, the quiet conversations, the underlying current of fear and hope mixed together. The pediatric cancer ward was painted in bright colors, with murals of animals and rainbows on the walls. Someone had tried to make it cheerful, but you could still feel the weight of what happened here. The sickness, the fear, the desperation. Patricia introduced her to one of the nurses, Rita, who had kind eyes and tired smile. "We have about 12 kids on the ward right now," Rita said, walking Victoria down the hall. "Some are sleeping, some are in treatment, but there are a few in the playroom if you want to start." The playroom was small but filled with toys, books, puzzles, and games. 3 kids were there, a teenage boy playing on a tablet, little girl maybe 5, coloring at a table, and there in the corner sitting on a beanbag chair reading a book to herself was the girl from the photo. Victoria froze in the doorway. Her heart stopped, her lungs stopped, everything stopped. The girl looked up and smiled. It was the same smile from the photo, the same eyes, the same everything. Hi, the girl said in a small voice. Are you new here? Victoria couldn't speak, she could only stare. This was real. This child was real and alive, and sitting right in front of her. The nurse gently touched Victoria's arm. Are you okay, Victoria? Nodded, even though she wasn't okay at all. She wasn't sure she would ever be okay again. Fine, she managed to say, just taking it all in. She walked into the room on shaky legs and sat down on a chair near Mia's beanbag. Victoria started, then stopped. She almost said her real name, Helen. I'm a new volunteer, Mia, the girl said, closing her book. My daddy will be here soon. He comes every day after school. He is a teacher. I heard. Victoria said softly, what are you reading? It's about a girl who goes on adventures. Mia held up the book. The cover was worn and creased from being read many times. My mommy used to read it to me before she went to heaven. Now daddy reads it. But I know all the words already, so sometimes I read it to myself. Victoria's chest ached. Would you like me to read you a different story? Maybe something new? Mia's face lit up. Really? You would do that? That's why I'm here, Victoria said, and meant it more than the girl could possibly know. They spent the next hour reading together. Victoria pulled book after book from the shelf, and Mia listened with wide eyes, completely absorbed. She asked questions, made comments, laughed at the funny parts. She was smart, curious, full of life, nothing like someone who was supposed to be dying. Between stories, Mia talked about her life. She loved butterflies and the color purple. She wanted to be a veterinarian. She missed going to school and playing with her friends. She talked about her daddy, how he was the best daddy in the whole world, how he tried so hard to make her smile. Even when she knew he was sad, he cries sometimes when he thinks I am asleep, Mia said quietly, but I hear him. I wish I could make him not sad anymore. Victoria felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she blinked them back. You make him happy just by being here, just by being you. Mia smiled a sad little smile. I hope so. We're reading a story about a brave princess when a man walked into the playroom. He was young, maybe mid-30s, with messy dark hair and tired eyes, wore khaki pants and a wrinkled button-down shirt with a coffee stain on the sleeve. Daddy, Mia called out. Waving, the man smiled, and it transformed his entire face. He walked over and kissed the top of Mia's head. Hey, sweetheart, sorry I am late. Staff meeting ran long. He noticed Victoria and extended his hand. David, Mia's dad. Victoria shook his hand, feeling like she was in a dream. Helen, I am a volunteer. I was just reading to Mia. David's eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, that is very kind. Some of the volunteers have been amazing. They really make a difference. Victoria nodded, unable to trust her voice. This was him, the man who had written that desperate plea. The man whose life she had changed with a single transaction, and he had no idea who she was. Is it okay if I keep coming back? She asked to read to Mia. Please, Mia said, grabbing Victoria's hand. You are my new favorite person, David laughed. She does not say that lightly. You must be pretty special. Victoria looked at this little girl with her bright eyes and brave smile, and felt something crack open inside her chest. Something that had been sealed shut for 15 years. Sai will be back next week, she promised. Same time. Mia clapped her hands. Yeah, Victoria said goodbye and walked out of the playroom. Her legs felt weak, her heart was pounding. She made it to the bathroom before the tears came. She locked herself in a stall and cried silently, her shoulders shaking, her hands pressed against her mouth to keep any sound from escaping. She cried for her daughter, who never got to grow up. She cried for Mia, who might actually have a chance. She cried for David, who loved his daughter so fiercely. She cried for herself and all the years she had spent locked away in her tower of ice. When the tears finally stopped, Victoria washed her face in the sink and stared at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were red. Her makeup was ruined. But she looked different somehow, more human, less like a statue. She had come here thinking she would make one visit, see that the girl was okay, ease her guilt, and then disappear back into her carefully controlled life. But now everything had changed. Couldn't walk away from Mia, not after seeing her smile, hearing her laugh, holding her small hand. And David, he was So genuine, so kind, so completely devoted to his daughter. He reminded Victoria of her ex-husband before the grief had torn them apart, before they had both retreated into their own separate worlds of pain. Victoria dried her face and reapplied her lipstick. Her hands were steadier now. She looked at her reflection one more time. "What are you doing?" she whispered to herself, but she already knew the answer. She was getting involved. She was breaking her own rules. She was letting people in, and it terrified her. Over the next few weeks, Victoria came to the hospital every Wednesday. She told her assistant she had a standing appointment. She cleared her calendar. She showed up like clockwork, and every week she spent 2 hours with Mia, reading stories, playing games, talking about everything and nothing. Mia told her about the experimental treatment, how it made her feel sick sometimes, but how the doctors said it was working. She talked about being excited to go back to school, to see her friends, to be normal again. Victoria watched this little girl fight with everything she had, and it broke her heart and healed it at the same time. God was always there too. Sometimes he sat and listened to the stories. Sometimes he worked on his laptop grading papers. Sometimes he just watched his daughter with love written all over his face. He started talking to Victoria more each week. At first it was just thank yous and small talk, but gradually they started having real conversations. He told her about his wife, how she had died 3 years ago, how hard it had been raising Mia alone. He talked about his job teaching 4th grade, about his students, about how he loved helping kids learn. Victoria found herself opening up too. It's not about her real life, of course, but about other things. She talked about books she had read, places she had traveled. She made up a whole fake life for Helen Morrison, and sometimes she wished it was real. Sometimes she forgot she was pretending. One Wednesday, about a month after she started volunteering, David walked into the playroom looking more exhausted than usual. Mia was having a good day playing with puzzles, so Victoria joined him near the window. "You look tired," she said gently. He gave a weak laugh. "I am tired. Tired is my default state these days. Do you want to talk about it?" David was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I got the bill today for MIA's treatment. All $2.3 million paid in full by an anonymous donor. I still cannot believe it. I keep thinking I am going to wake up, and it will all have been a dream." Victoria's heart raced. "What did you say?" "Said thank you." David said quietly, "Whoever they are, they saved my daughter's life. They gave us a future I would give anything to meet them, to thank them properly." "You just did," Victoria thought, but said nothing. David looked at her with those tired, honest eyes. "Sometimes I wonder why they did it, like what made them choose us out of all the people who need help. Why Mia?" Victoria swallowed hard. "Maybe they saw something special in her. Maybe they just wanted to help. Maybe," David said. "But I wish I knew. I wish I could tell them what it means that they did not just save Maya's life. They saved mine too, because I do not know what I would do if I lost her. She is all I have left." His voice cracked on the last words, and Victoria saw tears in his eyes without thinking. She reached out and squeezed his hand. "You are a good father. Mia is lucky to have you." David squeezed back. "Thank you, Helen. That means a lot." They stood there for a moment, hands clasped, looking out the window at the city below. And Victoria realized with a jolt of fear that she had made a terrible mistake. She was not supposed to care about these people. She was not supposed to feel anything, but it was too late. She already did. Television in Emmy's hospital room was playing the evening news, and David was only half paying attention. He was helping Mia with a puzzle, a colorful scene of ocean animals that she had been working on for days. Her hands moved slowly, carefully placing each piece like it was made of glass. Then he heard the name Victoria Sterling. David looked up at the screen and felt his heart stop there. She was Helen, the volunteer who had been visiting Maya's room for the past 3 weeks, the woman who read stories and brought coloring books and made his daughter laugh when nothing else could. But she wasn't Helen at all. The news anchor was talking about Victoria Sterling, CEO of Sterling Pharmaceuticals, one of the richest women in the country. The photo on the screen showed her in a business suit standing in front of a massive building, looking cold and powerful, and nothing like the warm, gentle person who had been sitting in that very chair just yesterday. David stared at the screen, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The hair was different, styled perfectly instead of pulled back in a simple ponytail. The clothes were a different expensive designer. Suits instead of casual sweaters and jeans, but the face was unmistakable. Helen was Victoria Sterling. And if Victoria Sterling was here, if she had been visiting Mia all this time, then that Mento, not she, was the one who had donated the money, the anonymous donor who had saved Ame's life, who had given them $2.3 million out of nowhere. That was her. That was Helen, no Victoria. David felt like the floor was tilting. Everything he thought he knew was suddenly wrong. The friendship he thought they had built, the connection he had felt every time they talked, was any of it real, or had she been playing some kind of game, pretending to be a normal person, while secretly she was a billionaire who could buy and sell his entire life with pocket change? Daddy, Mia said, tugging on his sleeve. "Are you okay, David?" Realized he was gripping the edge of the bed so hard his knuckles had turned white he forced himself to let go, to breathe, to think. "Yeah, sweetie, I'm fine," he said, but his voice sounded strange. "Why does that lady look like Helen?" Mia asked, pointing at the television. David grabbed the remote and turned off the TV. His mind was racing. He needed to think, needed to process this. But all he could feel was a confusing mix of gratitude and betrayal and anger and something else, something he didn't want to name. She had lied to him for 3 weeks. She had sat in this room, had talked to him like a friend, like an equal, had listened to his fears and worries, had held Mia's hand when she was scared, had been there, had cared, or at least he thought she cared, but it was all fake, wasn't. She was rich beyond imagination, and she had been slumming it, playing pretend in a children's cancer ward. Why, what kind of person did that? David stood up abruptly. "I need to make a phone call," he told Mia. "You'll be right back." Mia nodded already. Back to her puzzle, and David walked out into the hallway. His hands were shaking. He pulled out his phone and searched for Victoria. "Sterling, contact information office number A." Receptionist answered. "Sterling Pharmaceuticals. How may I direct your Callie need to speak to Victoria Sterling." David said. "May I ask who's calling?" "My name is David Chen." "Tell her it's about Mia." There was a pause. "One moment, please." David was put on hold, listening to soft classical music that did nothing to calm his nerves. He paced back and forth in the hallway, ignoring the looks from passing nurses. Then the line clicked. Victoria's voice came through, and she sounded different. More formal, more guarded. "So it's true," David said. "You were Victoria Sterling." There was a long silence. "Yes," she finally said. "And you're the one who donated the money." Another pause. "Yes," David laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Why didn't you tell me it was complicated?" She said. "Complicated." David repeated. That word gets used a lot by people who don't want to admit they lied. "I didn't lie to you," Victoria said, and there was an edge to her voice now. "I just didn't tell you everything. You pretended to be someone else," David said. "You pretended to be a volunteer named Helen. You sat in my daughter's room for weeks, and you never once thought to mention that you're a billionaire who does that, someone who wanted to help without making it about the money." Victoria said. David stopped pacing. "But it is about the money," he said. "That's exactly what this is about. You have money, and I don't. You can save my daughter, and I can't. You walk into my life and change everything, and I don't even know who you really root." "Know exactly who I am," Victoria said quietly. "In the same person I was yesterday, the same person who read to Mia, the same person who talked to you every evening after she fell asleep. The only thing that's different is that now you know my last name. It's not just your last name," David said. "It's everything. You lied about who you are. You made me think we were equals." "We are equals," Victoria said. "No," David said. "We're not. You can throw around millions of dollars like it's nothing. I had to beg strangers on the internet for help. Do you have any idea how that feels?" "Yes," Victoria said, and her voice cracked slightly. "I do." David wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to the betrayal he felt. But something in her voice made him pause. "What do you mean?" he asked. "Ty lost my daughter," Victoria said. 15 years ago, she was 7 years old. She had leukemia, just like Mia, and I watched her die because the treatment she needed didn't exist yet." David felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. "I built my company because of her," Victoria continued, "because I couldn't save her, but maybe I could save other people's children. And when I saw Maya's picture, when I read your post, she looked exactly like my daughter, David. Exactly. And I couldn't walk away. I had to help, but why didn't you just donate and leave it at that?" David asked. "Why come to the hospital? Why pretend to be someone else?" "Because," Victoria said, and now she was definitely crying, Because I needed to see her. I needed to know that she was okay, that the money made a difference, that this time someone was saved. And I thought if I told you who I was, you would treat me differently. You would see me as some rich person trying to buy goodwill, instead of just someone who cared. David leaned against the wall, feeling all his anger drain away. He didn't know what to feel anymore. You should have told me, he said quietly. No, Victoria said. You deserve to know. But I was afraid that if I told you the truth, everything would change, and it did, didn't it? Hey, now you're angry and you don't trust me and I ruined everything. David closed his eyes. He thought about all the evenings Victoria had spent in that room. It's the way she read to Mia with such tenderness, the way she listened when he talked about his fears. It's the way she had become part of their routine, part of their lives. Was that all fake, he asked. Was any of it real? It was all real, Victoria said. It was the most real thing I've done in 15 years. There was so much pain in her voice, so much longing. David remembered what she had said about losing her daughter, and he tried to imagine that kind of loss, tried to imagine watching Mia slip away and not being able to stop it. I'm sorry, David said. I didn't know. You couldn't have known, Victoria said. That's the point. I never told anyone. I built these walls around myself, and I told myself I was fine, that I had moved on, but I hadn't. I was just existing, just going through the motions, and then I saw Mia's picture and something broke open inside me, something I thought I had buried forever. Are you now? David asked. In my car, Victoria said. In the parking lot. I was coming to visit, but then I saw the news report and I figured you had seen it too. I didn't know if I should come up or just leave. David looked back toward Mia's room. He could see her through the window still, working on her puzzle, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding in the hallway. Come up, he said. Are you sure? Victoria asked. No, David said honestly, but come up anyway. We need to talk face to face, okay? Victoria said. I'll be there in 5 minutes. David hung up and stood in the hallway trying to figure out what he was going to say. He was still hurt, still felt betrayed. But he also understood now why she had lied, why she had needed to be Helen instead of Victoria. She wasn't trying to deceive him. She was trying to heal. 5 minutes later, the elevator doors opened and Victoria stepped out. She looked different than she had on TV. Less polished, more vulnerable. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in the ponytail he had. Gotten used to seeing she looked like Helen, but now he knew she was so much more than that. David walked toward her, and they stood facing each other in the hallway. Neither spoke for a long moment. Sorry, Victoria said finally. I should have told you sooner. David nodded. I'm sorry too, he said. I shouldn't have yelled at you on the phone. You saved Emma's life. I should be thanking you, not attacking you. You had every right to be angry, Victoria said. I lied to you even if my reasons were complicated. It was still a lie. They stood in awkward silence. Then David did something he hadn't planned. He stepped forward and hugged her. Victoria stiffened at first, clearly not used to being touched, but then slowly she relaxed and hugged him back. Thank you, David said into her shoulder. Thank you for saving my daughter. Thank you for being there. Thank you for everything. Victoria was crying now, really crying, her whole body shaking. I wish I could have saved mine, she whispered. I know, David said, holding her tighter. I'm so sorry. They stood like that for a long time, two broken people holding each other up in a hospital hallway. The walls Victoria had built around herself were crumbling, and for the first time in 15 years, she was letting someone see the real her, not the CEO, not the dragon lady, just a mother who had lost her child and never learned how to move on. When they finally pulled apart, both their eyes were red. Can I still visit Mia? Victoria asked. Or do you want me to stay away? Shook his head. Of course you can visit. She asks about you constantly. You're her favorite person. Don't want to intrude, Victoria said. Door not intruding, David said. You're family. The word hung in the air between them. Family. It was too soon to say that. Wasn't it they barely knew each other? Or did they? Maybe the past 3 weeks had been more real than either of them realized. Let's go see her, David said. She finished that ocean puzzle. I think she's very proud of it. Victoria smiled, a real, genuine smile. That transformed her entire face. Okay, she said. Let's go. They walked toward Mia's room side by side. When they entered, Mia looked up, and her face lit up. Helen, she said, then paused. Wait, are you Helen, or are you? Victoria laughed through her tears. Both, she said. Can I be both? Mia thought about it. Sure, she said. I like both names. She held out her hand, showing Victoria the completed puzzle. "Look, I finished it's beautiful," Victoria said, sitting down in her usual chair. "It's perfect." David watched them together, his daughter and this woman who had saved her life, and he realized that despite the lies, despite the confusion, despite everything, Victoria had been right when she said nothing had changed. She was still the same person who had been showing up every day, still the same person who cared on. Maybe that was all that really mattered. They spent the rest of the evening like they always did, Victoria reading stories, David sitting nearby, Mia smiling and laughing like nothing was wrong, like the world wasn't complicated, like they were just three normal people spending time together. And for those few hours, maybe they were later. After Mia fell asleep, David and Victoria sat in the hallway with coffee from the vending machine. "What happens now?" David asked. "I don't know." Victoria admitted. "I didn't think this far ahead." David smiled. "Neither did I." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the nurses walk by, listening to the quiet sounds of the hospital at night. "Can I ask you something?" David said. "Anything," Victoria replied. "Why did you really come back? After you donated the money, you could have just walked away. You never had to visit. Why did you?" Victoria was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, because she said, "I wanted to see what it would have been like if my daughter had lived, if she had gotten better. I wanted to be part of that, to see a little girl grow up and be happy. I know that's selfish. I know it's not fair to you or Mia, but I couldn't help myself." "It's not selfish," David said. "It's human. We all want second chances." Victoria said, "Even when we know we can't change the past." David reached over and took her hand. "Maybe this is your second chance," he said, "not to replace what you lost, but to honor it." Victoria looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Maybe," she said, "maybe it is." And in that moment, sitting in a hospital hallway holding hands with a man she barely knew, Victoria finally felt something she hadn't felt in 15 years. She felt like she was home 3 weeks after the truth came out. Everything changed in ways David never expected. The news media had somehow gotten wind of the story. A reporter from some tabloid had put the pieces together. Victoria Sterling, Billionaire CEO, visiting a children's hospital, the anonymous donation to a teacher's dying daughter. It was too good a story to ignore. David first learned about it when his principal called him into her office one morning before school started. "Have you seen this?" she asked, turning her computer screen toward him. There, on the screen, was a headline that made his stomach drop. "Billionaire Ice Queen has a heart. What's her real agenda?" The article was brutal. It suggested that Victoria was using Mia for publicity, that David was a gold digger trying to trap a rich woman. The whole thing was a calculated PR stunt. There were photos to ones that must have been taken by someone with a telephoto lens. Victoria entering the hospital, Victoria and David talking in the hallway, Victoria holding Mia's hand. David felt sick reading it. They had twisted everything, made something beautiful into something ugly and suspicious. "I don't know what to say." David told his principal, "This isn't what it looks like. You don't owe me an explanation," she said gently, "but you should know this is all over the internet. People are talking." David drove to the hospital in a daze. His phone kept buzzing with messages from people he hadn't talked to in years, suddenly interested in his life. Porters had started calling, asking for interviews, wanting the inside story. When he got to MIA's room, Victoria was already there, but she wasn't alone. A woman in an expensive suit was with her, talking in low, urgent tones. "We need to get ahead of this," the woman was saying. "Issue a statement, control the narrative." Victoria looked tired. More tired than David had ever seen her. "Just leave it," she told the woman. "It will blow over." "Won't blow over," the woman insisted. "This is damaging your reputation. The board is concerned. Investors are asking questions." David cleared his throat, and both women looked up. "Bill, give you to some privacy," the woman said, giving David a look that clearly said she blamed him for this mess. Then she left him. "Sorry," Victoria said immediately. "I don't know how they found out I was so careful." "It's not your fault," David said, sitting down, "but we need to talk about this." "I know." Victoria said, "What do you want to do?" David had been thinking about this all morning. "I think we should ignore it," he said. "If we respond, we just feed the story. But if we stay quiet, eventually they'll find something else to write about." Victoria nodded. "That was my thought too, but my PR team disagrees. They want me to issue a statement denying any personal involvement. Say I donate to lots of causes, that this is nothing special." David felt something twist in his chest. Nothing special. He repeated, "That's what they want me to say." Victoria said quickly, "But it's not true, you know that, right? This is special, you're special, Mia is special before." David could respond. Mai's doctor came in with news. Her latest scans looked good. The treatment was working. She was going into remission. David grabbed Victoria's hand without thinking. Both of them had tears in their eyes as the doctor explained the next steps: more monitoring, more checkups, but if things continued this way, Mia could go home in a few weeks. When the doctor left, David and Victoria just held each other. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The relief, the joy, the overwhelming gratitude said everything then. Mia's small voice broke the moment. "Why are you guys crying?" she asked. "Are you sad, no, sweetie?" David said, wiping. His eyes were happy. "You're getting better, oh. Good," Mia said. Then she looked at Victoria. "Can you come home with us when I leave, Victoria?" And David exchanged a glance. "I don't live with you, sweetie." Victoria said gently. "Why not?" Mia asked. Because Victoria started, but she didn't know how to finish. Mia crossed her arms. It's the way she always did when she was being stubborn. "I think you should live with us," she said. "We could be a family out of the mouths of babes." David thought, watching Victoria's face cycle through about 10 different emotions. "Let's talk about that later, okay, David?" said Mia. Huffed but went back to her coloring, leaving the two adults to sit in awkward silence. Over the next few days, the media attention got worse. Photographers camped outside. The hospital reporters tried to sneak in disguised as visitors. Security had to be increased. David couldn't take Mia 4 walks around the hospital anymore. Couldn't even go to the cafeteria without someone recognizing him and asking questions. Victoria stopped coming to the hospital. David understood why. The attention was making everything worse. Every time she showed up, it gave the tabloids. It's more ammunition, more photos, more fuel for their stories. But he missed her, and more importantly, Mia missed her. "Where is Helen?" Victoria Mia asked every day. "Why doesn't she visit anymore?" "She's busy, sweetie," David would say. "She's got work." But the truth was harder to explain. The truth was that the world had taken something pure and good and poisoned it with suspicion and gossip. Then, one morning, David got a call from Victoria's assistant, Ms. Sterling. "I'd like to invite you and Mia to dinner at her home," the assistant said. "Tomorrow evening, if you're available. A car will pick you up at 6. David hesitated. "Is this a good idea with all the media attention, Ms.?" Sterling was very clear. The assistant said, "She wants to see you both, and she has something important to discuss the next evening." A black car pulled up to the hospital. Right on time, a driver opened the door and helped David get Mia settled. It was her first time leaving the hospital in weeks, and she was so excited her whole face glowed. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To Victoria's house," David said. "Does she have a big house?" Mia wanted to know. "I think so," David admitted. The car drove through the city and into the hills, where the houses got bigger and farther apart. Finally, they pulled up 2 gates that opened automatically, revealing a driveway that seemed to go on forever. When the house came into view, David understood why people called Victoria the Ice Queen. The place was massive, all glass and steel and sharp angles, beautiful but cold. Like a museum instead of a home. Victoria met them at the door, and she was different again. Not the polished CEO from the news, not the casual volunteer from the hospital. Something in between. Shay had obviously been nervous cleaning everything, making sure it was perfect. David could see it in the way she kept smoothing her hair, the way she talked too fast. Showing them around the house was incredible: high ceilings, expensive art museum quality furniture, but it felt empty. Every room was perfect but lifeless, like no one actually lived. There, Mia was the one who said it. "This house is sad," she announced. David wanted to shush her, but Victoria just laughed. "Her right," she said. "It is sad. I've lived here for 5 years and have never had anyone visit." "Not really." "Why not?" Mia asked. "Because Victoria said I forgot how they had dinner in a dining room with a table that could seat 20. It should have felt ridiculous, just the 3 of them at this enormous table, but somehow it felt right, like they were claiming the space, making it theirs." After dinner, Victoria asked David to come out to the terrace while Mia watched a movie in the living room. They stood looking out over the city, lights spread below them like stars. "I need to tell you something," Victoria said. "Okay," David said, bracing himself. "My PR team wants me to distance myself from you and Mia." Victoria said, "They think the media attention is bad for business. They want me to issue a statement and disappear from your lives." David felt his heart sink. "Is that what you want?" "No," Victoria said fiercely. "It's the opposite of what I want, but I need to know." what you want, because if I stay in your lives, this won't stop. The media will keep digging. They will make up stories. They will follow you and Mia everywhere. They will turn your life into a circus. And I can't do that to you." David was quiet for a long moment, watching the city below. When my wife died, he finally said, "I thought my life was over. I thought I would just go through the motions, take care of Mia, do my job, survive. But not really live. Then Mia got sick, and I thought I was going to lose her too. I thought I was going to be completely alone." He turned to face Victoria. "But then you showed up, and yes, you lied about who you were, and yes, this media circus is terrible. But you gave me back my daughter, and more than that, you reminded me what it feels like to have someone. To talk to someone who understands loss, someone who cares." Victoria had tears streaming down her face. "I don't care what the tabloids say." David continued, "I don't care what your PR team thinks. I don't care what anyone thinks. I care about you, and Mia cares about you, and if that means dealing with photographers and reporters and gossip, then so be it, because you're worth a tar." "You sure?" Victoria whispered. David stepped closer and took her hands. "I'm sure." They stood like that for a long moment. Then, slowly, carefully, David leaned in and kissed her. It was soft and tentative, and when they pulled apart, both of them were crying. "I don't know how to do this," Victoria admitted. "I don't know how to be part of a family anymore. I don't know if I remember." "How? We'll figure it out together," David said. "What if I mess it up?" Victoria asked, "What if I'm too broken?" David smiled. "We've all got broken pieces," he said. "Maybe we can help each other put them back together." From inside the house, they heard Mia calling. For them, they went back in to find her standing in the middle of the enormous living room. "This house needs more stuff," she announced. "More colors and toys and pictures on the walls." Victoria laughed. "You're absolutely right. What else does it need, Daydog?" Mia said immediately, "And a piano, and one of those big teddy bears from the toy store, and more people. It needs more people living in it." Victoria looked at David with a question in her eyes. "Are you asking us to move in?" David said. Mia nodded enthusiastically. Victoria took a breath. "It's crazy, right? We barely know each other. The media would have a field day. My board would think I've lost my mind, probably." David agreed, but Victoria continued, "What if we did it anyway? What if we just said, forget what everyone thinks, and we became a family for real?" David felt like his heart might burst. "Is that what you want more than anything?" Victoria said. Then Mia did something that surprised them both. She walked over to Victoria and hugged her tight. "When you saved my life," Mia said, "that made you part of our family already. You just didn't know it." Yet Victoria broke down completely. She dropped to her knees and hugged Mia back, sobbing into the little girl's shoulder. All the grief and pain and loneliness of 15 years came pouring out while David stood watching, feeling his own tears fall. Victoria finally pulled herself together. She looked up at David with red eyes and a genuine smile. "So," she said, "how do we do this?" David held out his hand and helped her too. "Her feet one day at a time," he said, "just like everything else." 2 weeks later, the media was still talking about the scandal, but David and Victoria didn't care. They were too busy helping Mia pack up her hospital room, preparing for her to finally come home. And when the reporters showed up at Victoria's house expecting a statement, they got something completely different. They got Victoria, David, and Mia standing together on the front steps, holding hands. Victoria spoke calmly and clearly, her voice steady. "Yes, I donated money to save this little girl's life. Yes, I care about this family deeply, and no, I don't owe anyone an explanation. The people who matter know the truth, and everyone else can think whatever they want." Then she did something that shocked everyone watching. She looked at David, smiled, and said, "And just so, there are no more secrets." "I need to tell you something." What David asked confused him. "Falling in love with you," Victoria said, "right here in front of all these cameras and reporters and gossips. I'm falling in love with you and your daughter, and I don't care who knows it." The cameras went crazy. Reporters shouted questions. But David just pulled Victoria close and kissed her while Mia cheered, and the whole world watched later. That night, after all the excitement had died down and Mia was asleep in her new room in Victoria's house, David and Victoria sat together on the couch. "That was quite a statement." He said, "Too much?" Victoria asked. David shook his head. "It was perfect." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the house settling around them. It didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like a home. Victoria rested her head on David's shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, "for what David asked for, letting me be part of your family, for giving me a second chance at happiness, for reminding me how to live." David kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for saving my daughter." "Our daughter," Victoria corrected softly, "if that's okay." David smiled. "Our daughter," he agreed on, in that moment. Everything that had seemed impossible became possible. The broken pieces started fitting together. The sad house became a happy home. And three people who had been lost found each other. The world had expected a scandal. What they got instead was a love story, and it was just beginning.